Hey guys, Philosopher here, and today I've got my war defense tier list for the month of August 2021. So right now it is safe to say that war defense has been totally transformed with the arrival of Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi is super strong and transforms this Heroes for Hire team from a team that you could reliably one-shot with kind of a collection of characters. People were using Kestrel, Silver Surfer, and then Black Bolt, and a couple other characters, strong characters to defeat Heroes for Hire. That does not work anymore. And so now that has really changed the war defense meta quite a bit. Infinity Watch is the only team so far that people have come up with that has reliably beat the Heroes for Hire, and that really changes the rankings a little bit. It does a little bit of a shakeup. There are some other changes as well. This is one of my most popular videos generally each month. I waited to do this one, though, until Shang-Chi came into the game because I think we don't want to do – I don't think it's helpful for you guys to put out a list that's going to be out of date very soon, and it was clear he was going to shake up the meta. And really, this is at the very top here, and this is now a team that is really almost – you could argue it's in its own tier, and I ended up deciding to put it in a tier still with Infinity Watch, and here's my thought process. For both of these teams, you essentially want to have Infinity Watch to counter these teams. Now, can you counter either of these teams without Infinity Watch? Yes. We haven't figured out that team for Heroes for Hire. It would probably take many hits to do it. But the testing is still ongoing, and players can be pretty clever about what they come up with. As far as Infinity Watch, I know it can be done because we have faced at times an opponent who just puts all their Infinity Watch on defense, for example, and we've used non-Infinity Watch to clear it. So you can use different combinations of Secret Avenger teams and things like that to clear an Infinity Watch. It's definitely usually a punch down, but you could do it, and certainly you could do it in multiple hits. People asked me, of these two teams, what's the easier one to counter without Infinity Watch? And I think it's certainly of the two, it's Infinity Watch from what I've seen so far. Obviously, my experience with Shang-Chi is limited. It's compared to, what we have seen from a lot of these other teams. I don't know that team inside or out, and I think it's fair to say we haven't fully developed, what the potential counters are here. But as of right now, August 25th, we've had Shang-Chi in the game for, a war or two. These two look like they are in their own tier. And to be very blunt, even before Shang-Chi, these two are basically in their own tier because the rest of these teams you can one-shot with a lot lesser of a team. And that's why I really put a separator between tier 1 and tier 3 here, because I think the gap between these teams and everything else is very significant. You can always just sack a Doom team. In other words, you could send a team in, Doom ults, and you could send in another team. And that's what ends up, if we are in a situation where our opponent has run out of teams and they end up needing to clear us at the end, that's the sort of thing that they will do. But you can't really do that so easily, right, with Heroes for Hire Infinity Watch. You can't just send in your, low-end power armor team or something just to survive for a few turns to get an ult off, because the Heroes for Hire reset their abilities. Infinity Watch is so strong, you're not going to make a dent on that team. And it's really, they're not necessarily ability dependent. It's not like, having some cooldowns used is going to make the team that much weaker. So I think these teams are in their own tier. And really, right now, the meta, revolves around how you use those teams and how you counter those teams. In other words, on the attacking side, you have to be thinking about how many Infinity Watch are on defense, how many of my opponents are going to have Heroes for Hire built, how many of my opponents are going to have Shang-Chi on the Heroes for Hire team, and then how are we going to be, how are we going to have our Infinity Watch teams? How many of our players have Infinity Watch built? How do they match up, and so forth? You can punch up on Infinity Watch with Infinity Watch, but you have to have the discipline of your own players and know what teams to use it against, and you often have to manage that process. At least that's at the level of war I'm at, where I'm trying to manage me and other captains are trying to manage that. It's definitely something that takes a lot of active management on our part to do. So this is really, these two teams are on a tier of their own. A lot of people have asked me, what do you do against the Infinity Watch team, both with or without Adam Warlock? Certainly the best option is to punch up with Infinity Watch. But, as I said, other options are punching down with Secret Avengers plus some combination of other characters. Even if you only take out half the team, you generally then are able to two-shot it, which is not an awful situation. Okay, not a situation where you're not going to be able to clear the enemy room or something like that. But the new Heroes for Hire team, much harder. Essentially, teams that aren't Infinity Watch are basically just trying to kill a character or two to try to get it down in 2 or 3 shots, at least basically what we've seen so far. Now, the next tier of defenses are down here. So there's 2 defenses that I have that are listed at the top here. And actually, while I do this, I'm going to move Uncanny X-Men up on top of Brotherhood. I've been seeing now there's been a real movement in Diamond level war in the top 10 back to Uncanny Doom. And part of the reason why is, so Uncanny Doom was more popular than Brotherhood Doom. And then when Kestrel came out, Kestrel really can, counter very strongly Uncanny Doom because of her ability to prevent the cloning and so forth and summons when she is charged. So if you look here, if an enemy has attempted to summon or clone, this match she clears charge. But when she has charge, enemies can't summon or clone. Since Dark Phoenix is a summon, if you bring in Kestrel and quickly kill Phoenix, Dark Phoenix never spawns. And then in addition to that, Doom doesn't spawn his Doombots until she loses that charge. And so essentially, it can put you really ahead against Uncanny Doom. Once Kestrel got moved, though, to fighting Heroes for Hire, that changed, because then what happened was now people are back to Uncanny Doom. It's a tougher defense, slightly tougher defense than Brotherhood Doom. This also frees up your Brotherhood for offense if you still want to use it there. It's not as useful other than if your opponents are putting symbiotes on defense or running crap like Pimtech or Technerva, these old super power creep teams. But nonetheless, these are 2 very strong Doom defenses that require a powerful response, usually something like X Factor, either with Rhino against Brotherhood or with Namor or something else where you're trying to run that. But even those fights can be tricky. You could sometimes lose. So not a perfect counter there. And these defenses actually do hold. I do have people asking me from time to time, how do you make these teams? Like what characters do you want to put on your, let's say, Uncanny Doom team? For Uncanny Doom, it's very simple. You can, as long as you got Phoenix and Colossus on the team, you put Doom, and then you can put whatever else you want. Most of the time people put Psylocke because she has that buff removal on her ultimate. You can certainly throw in a character like Cyclops, or you can put in other characters. I've seen everything from Minerva and Squirrel Girl and Ghost and all sorts of other stuff that people try to throw in. It doesn't, I don't think it really none of those things fundamentally change the fight. With Brotherhood, it's much more straightforward. Brotherhood, you would take off Pyro and put in Doom. So the team would be Magneto, Blob, Toad, Juggernaut, and Doom. So people you may be wondering why are these teams so good? In fact, I've had a bunch of kind of noobs or something tell me like, oh, there's crap. You're so silly to put Uncanny on defense or Brotherhood. And I mean, literally, for months, that is all I've seen, for not only in this alliance, but in my prior alliance on defense. And the reason why, you may say, well, why would you do that? Well, if you just put Doom on defense, without these, a team like that around him, he's going to get destroyed by like symbiotes or Axemen or something like that, because on his turn, he summons a Doombot. And those Doombots are just going to generate turn meter for the symbiotes, generate turn meter for Axemen. And so initially when Doom came out, people were creating teams like Doom Marauders or whatever. Those teams get rolled by, and I think you saw it on this channel back in the day, get rolled by the symbiotes or Axemen or whatever. So Brotherhood stops that because Brotherhood is going to blind the enemy and the symbiotes just never get going. The Axemen start behind. It's very difficult for the Axemen. Plus, there's these two taunts, Blob and Juggernaut, that prevent you from reliably killing the Doombots, because unless the Doombot spawn right next to the taunt, you're not able to get it with those teams. Similarly, with Uncanny, you just can't get past Colossus, essentially, if you are running one of those attack teams. And so that's really, at high levels, that's basically the only Doom teams we ever see that I can remember. There are other people try to do other stuff. It generally doesn't work very well. Regarding Black Order, this is another one. For a long time, the rule was Black Order should always be on offense, not defense. And the idea being that, generally speaking, since you can always punch up on Black Order with Black Order, you want to have your Black Order on offense rather than just throw it on defense and let the enemy punch up on your Black Order. Well, that was true back in the day, and it is certainly true right now of Infinity Watch, which I guess is a good analogy, right? It's now the one most powerful team. The difference is now Black Order is no longer that team. So when you look at the Black Order team, it is less important in war when we had our war offense tier list than not only Infinity Watch, but even teams like Shadowland and, Secret Avengers and certain Kestrel teams and so forth. So what do you use this team for on war offense? Well, it can defeat a lot of different stuff. And so it's still useful to have. And if you don't have a very well-developed war offense, you couldn't even consider putting it on defense. However, if you have everything built out, which is where I am at in this game, in other words, where my alliance mates are at and where our opponents are at, then you can consider putting Black Order on defense, because there's so many new characters out, and you generally only need 9 attacks before you full clear the other side. That we can easily leave this off our top 9 teams and still counter everything, because the only team that this really is super good at countering is Uncanny. Otherwise, everything else can easily be countered by something else, whether it is Shadowland or X Factor, which are probably better, more useful war offense teams right now, or like I said, whether it's Infinity Watch, and there's other teams that can counter certain teams, whether it's X-Men or something. So this is a team that, like I said, sometimes on offense, sometimes on defense. It really depends on the situation. All right, now, next team on here, Inhumans, Surfer, Coulson. This is another team that, was kind of on the list for a while. It used to be the best defense in the game. Now it is, it had been off defense for a while because it was needed for the Heroes for Hire counter team. Now that Shang-Chi is back in the game and Infinity Watch is out, it is suddenly a much more viable option. And so generally what this team looks like is it is Black Bolt, Yo-Yo, and Crystal. Those are the 3, I'll call them good Inhumans. And then you have Silver Surfer and Coulson. That's usually what it looks like. But there are other options as well. People take out Crystal and they put in characters, whether it's Emma or Doc Ock. You put all sorts of, any kind of spare Ghost, whatever great character you have that you want to throw in there. Shuri, I've seen all sorts of stuff. The idea being Black Bolt and Yo-Yo are fantastic characters. They don't really, if you're not using them to counter Heroes for Hire, they're really kind of fallen off on war offense. But when they are paired with Coulson's ultimate will cause Black Bolt to attack the enemy with the highest damage, so he can really obliterate your team, particularly if there's defense down as a room, like a securities nearby or something like that. And then also, of course, Silver Surfer wreaks havoc too. So it's a very good team. And the reason that I have these teams in the same tier as the Uncanny and Brotherhood Doom teams is, at the level that I'm at, we don't have, both sides are trying to stay under 24 losses before clearing the enemy's teams. And these are all teams that just through the sheer size of the team or through some RNG can just create a loss. In other words, the teams below them can almost all be reliably countered, where if you lose, you're probably using the wrong team, or you're trying to punch up too high or something like that. Whereas these teams, there's just RNG with the Doom teams that it can cause a loss. And then here, similarly, like your Black Order can just be so big that it can just be hard to mirror match or whatever is being used to defeat it. Similarly, here, this team can just, you get your 7-star Surfer or some humongous 6 red star Surfer or something, and it can just beat you through random chance or something like that, or defense down. Something screws you there. The rest of these teams are definitely a rung down. So other Doom defenses, this is just like where people throw Doom in with like Marauders or, Fantastic Four or something. You generally can just bring in a standard team and just beat them, whether it's Shadowland or if the team is bad enough, if there isn't taunts and things that are going to screw up the symbiotes, you can just use symbiotes or Axemen. So these teams aren't nearly as good as these, because basically, as long as your opponent really knows what they're doing, then they're going to win. Where you're basically relying on your opponent to screw up. The good news for you is a Doom is such a tricky character that sometimes the enemy can screw up anyway, but usually they don't. Well, it depends, I guess, on your opponent, but they often don't. Kestrel's shield is just a really bad use of Kestrel. You may say, well, why? I get people that ask me all the time, well, Kestrel's shield's fantastic in my level of war. Well, war, the art of war in this game is really, it's at the alliance-wide level where you're deploying your best teams against their best teams, and the goal is to sort of trade up. It's like in chess where you're trying to use your pawn to take out the enemy queen or something. And so, Kestrel, if you look here on War Offense, my War Offense tier list, which I've did another video on, you should check it out. I'll link that below. I also link, by the way, the War Defense tier list document below, and I do keep that up to date on my Discord, which is also linked below. But you'll see Kestrel like right here at the top, right? And one of these are, the top, basically she's at the very top. Either she can be used to counter Heroes for Hire if your opponent doesn't have Shang-Chi, or she can be used with Secret Avengers to create a super team that's just kind of a rung below Infinity Watch. Well, instead of that, you're using her kind of here as like on a 4th tier defense. Like, why would you do that, right? So I do get people asking me, well, in my level of war, this is actually very powerful because, it forces a large team on the other side. And I'm like, well, you can just use like Axemen or something and beat this. And they're like, yeah, but that's great. Well, it depends, I guess, on the level of war you're at. And this is, I'm adding this and making this comment to show you the context. In other words, these lists are created with the assumption you have everything built out. I don't know other levels of war because I don't experience them right now. So I can't tell you what the tier list would be in like Gold 4 or Platinum 1. And if it's based on like what you have built, it's going to be very specific to you, right? If you have a massive Axemen team and and for example, you don't have Doom, well, that's going to change things. Or your Brotherhood isn't built up. Well, you can't put Brotherhood Doom on your tier list if you don't have it built, for example. So, if for you putting Kestrel on defense is great because it's going to draw a massive Axeman, so be it. But generally speaking, losing a very special character, certainly in my opinion, the best character in the game, and I would say arguably the most important war character in the game, losing her to just take out an Axeman, which is really just an okay war offense if you have everything built out. They're kind of like below the teams like whether it's Shadowland or X Factor, even Black Order. I think they're just okay. I don't think that's a good trade, but so be it. Astonishing X-Men also better on offense. I get people asking me, well, why do I put it on defense? If I don't, I'll get questions. Where would it be on the defense list? But it's definitely another team I think is still better used on offense, even though it's just an okay-ish team. The rest of these teams this is where you fill your slots. So I get people asking me, well, how do you even fill the slots? You have 8 slots to fill. Well, you can't fill them with all these teams, right? So, assuming you don't use Infinity Watch on defense, you've got one, and then you got 2, you got one of these Doctor Doom teams. Then the question is, do you put either of these? Because this could help you. These characters can help you counter your Heroes for Hire. Then you end up filling your things with teams like this: Mercenaries, Marauders, Symbiotes, Wave 1 Avengers, etc. Now, Mercenaries, the one of the changes in this list is I moved up Korath Mercenaries. And the reason this is done, the reason that this change has been made is at high levels now, what I am seeing is a strong movement towards Korath and Ultimus. The reason being that Ultimus has abilities that essentially he can just wreck a target with taunt. And he actually gets speed bar when the enemy has taunt. And so Red Guardian spawns with taunt. And so what ends up happening is Ultimus gets speed bar and he just wrecks Red Guardian. Now you need a massive taunt Ultimus to do this. So while this may be very important at my level in war where there's people with like 7 red star G15 Ultimus, it may not be relevant to you at all. And I will just tell you, if the Ultimus is smaller than your Red Guardian, it does nothing. Red Guardian still lives. And so he loses taunt, but you just keep going. Your skill military beats the mercs anyway. But if the Ultimus is bigger, this becomes an issue, and it has been moving. And I've tried to decide, should this team be up here or, at the bottom of tier 4, the top of tier 5? That's really a judgment call, but I'm just calling it out as definitely a movement here. This team is old and not really used because Black Widow is generally on skill military and is better on that team. But this is if you don't have skill military build, you don't have all those T4s on it. This is, you can put it with her with Wave 1 Avengers. They're still very good. They scale very well with a lot of gear. Mercenaries at Killmonger and Shuri used to be the best mercenaries. They're still very good. They scale very, very well with gear as they get bigger and bigger. Unfortunately, they are totally countered by skill military. And then the rest of these teams are just, Marauders are easily countered by a number of different teams now. Symbiotes, people just throw them on defense because they tend to have them very big and, just force the enemy to do something. They can provide some issues. People throw Hydra plus Zemo. I think Zemo's better on offense and still more useful. He's such a versatile character you can throw into many teams. But if you have Zemo on the team, Hydra can be tricky on defense unless you really know how to counter it. But, Zemo has to be on the team. Otherwise, the team is not very good. Uncanny can, create some issues as well or force, sometimes teams will use Black Order against it or whatever, which is a good result generally for Uncanny. And then the teams that can kind of fill out the top 8 slots for people are teams like Sinister Six, which is easily countered by X-Men, Fantastic Four, which you need an insane investment in to get a return there. You need a massive She-Hulk on that. Or Wave 1 Avengers without Black Widow, where you just throw Coulson in or Captain Marvel or whatever. These other teams here really shouldn't be used unless you just have very limited roster. I keep them on here just because people will ask me about them or they still see them at their level of war, but you should try to be looking to replace these teams. They're all old and power crept. So that's the list for the month of August. I try to keep this up to date. I will be on the lookout in September as we see more changes with Heroes for Hire, if that changes the meta. But for right now, this is a pretty accurate list based on what I am seeing in war. So if you like this video, if you smash that like button, subscribe to this channel. If you have comments, leave them below. I always like to hear your feedback, or just go to my Discord. Lots of great Alliance War conversations there. And also check out my Twitch stream. That's where these videos are made, and those are that is linked below as well.